Welcome back! Friday Dose, the Backup Monster show. On today's episode, we'll talk about the data reuse and secondary data management. My guest is Richard Wallace, Business Development Manager from IBM Storage Division.
Okay, come on.
Richard. So today, major topic, we'll talk about the data reuse and secondary data management, yes? But let's right now briefly talk about your experience and why you're here, actually.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm working with IBM at the moment from a business development perspective, looking at some of their products that really fit into that, I guess, data protection, data reuse, secondary data management piece. My job is really looking at end user engagements, channel engagements, and really kind of evangelizing around the product set that IBM have.
Okay, so right now you're responsible for the secondary data management and copy data management.
That's right.
Could you a little bit say about this trend?
Really wasn't a topic 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago. Whereas now, even over the last couple of months, it's suddenly started accelerating. So people are looking at modernizing infrastructure and modernizing data centers. And as a result of that, there's a need to modernize data protection and backup. Secondary data management becomes a part of that. And data reuse and all those types of topics that we're going to be talking about today.
Okay. So Richard, what actually driving existing customers to think about the comparing traditional data protection with the modernized data protection?
Well, I think if you look at traditional data protection, nothing's changed really since it was invented. You know, you want to protect your data, you move it from one place to another place, and you put it there and hope that you're never really going to use it. Yes, there's been things like dedupe and compression and virtual tape libraries and innovations in there, but the end result is pretty much the same. You know, traditionally, you move it from one place to the other, and it becomes
protect and store, actually.
Exactly. But I think as modern workloads are starting to develop, modern data centers starting to develop, people wanting to do more faster with technology, there's a need to modernize that back-end system and actually derive some value from it, rather than it just being a kind of insurance policy piece. So what we're looking to do now is think, well, okay, how can we get more value out of the insurance policy piece and derive some value from that big pool of back-end data that's sitting there? So, a lot of people now are saying that data is the new oil. You know, it has intrinsic value in it. So if you've got a huge repository of data sitting there in backup and you're not using it, you're getting no value at all. So how can we find mechanisms and ways and technologies to enable users to mine into and tap into that data at the back end and start to use it and start to modernize that, and so that they can start to use it for a whole bunch of different use cases that will actually drive businesses forward and drive value into a business.
So let's think a little bit how you see this value and how you explain your existing customers or partners how to bring this value into the reality.
Yeah, so and I think we need to look at this in terms of what those use cases might be for a customer. So if you think in most modern environments, you've got developers, you've got people doing test development, reporting, analytics, all these types of things where they need copies of data. Now, the traditional process for creating those copies of data is actually quite old. And generally, when we're talking to customers, the process for creating a copy for, say, a developer can be as long as 2 weeks. So if we can find ways that we can instantly mount that backup data, potentially with self-service, so that the developer can actually be matched up with that data and start to use it instantly, then there's massive value for a business in being able to really rapidly get new products, new software, new ideas, whatever it is, and innovate to get things out to market.
So you said about the developers, but what other line of the business should be interesting to use the modernized data protection and the new approach?
Yeah, it could be anybody who needs a copy of data. So it might be an accounting team who need to do financial reporting on up-to-date copies of data, maybe on a daily basis, a monthly basis, whatever that may be. We can get that data instantly to those people. So it could be reporting, it could be analytics, looking at kind of customer behavior and getting that data and being able to manipulate that and do things with it quicker. So any use where anybody in an organization needs a copy, we can facilitate that.
I really like, so the demanding starts when the company realized that we need this copy. And in the traditional way, we didn't have this demanding. We just stored and forget. And maybe for even 10, 15 years, we haven't used this one.
Yeah.
Only in case of the data restoration.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so right now the demand is changing. Everybody would like to get this copy actually instantly.
Instantly,
yes?
yeah, absolutely. And if you look at again, the old world, what those teams, especially the developers and the kind of IT savvy type people in an organization would do, is if IT can't deliver their data, they'll go and do their own thing. So they'll do shadow IT. You know, they're clever enough. They've sometimes got their own budgets, so they may buy their own storage. They may go out to a cloud provider, and they'll spin up their own copies in their own time, using their own infrastructure. Now, that sits outside of kind of corporate governance, if you like, in a way. So IT suddenly are out of control of a proliferation of copies that are happening across a whole environment and maybe out into third-party suppliers. So
Okay.
that becomes a real risk. But it's the only way they can get their job done. So by putting something in place that enables IT to deliver those copies quickly and easily, but also enables the developers to self-serve and be able to actually spin up their own copies through that IT mechanism. There's a win-win on both sides.
So you're saying that the old school, the traditional way of doing the data protection, engage and creating some shadow IT, yes?
Yeah, and you know we are seeing that. You know we have seen that in a number of organisations where IT simply can't deliver, and you know people have to do their jobs, so they'll go and find a way of getting the copies that they need.
Bartosz, how you see the shadow IT guy? Could you visualize it?
Yeah, I think it's a very regular, ordinary person that is, you know, helpless. You know, nobody can help him from the organization, so he's trying to do it, the job himself.
He gets it.
We need to do a music about the shadow IT guys.
Shadow IT guy.
Yeah. Okay, Jen. So let's come back to our major topic. Let's a little bit drill down into the word reuse.
Yeah.
So what is your definition, Richard?
So we'll start with reuse.
Okay.
So this is a term that we've started using. So data reuse. And if you think of the conversation we had around, you know, traditional backup and moving it into a secondary repository, you're not reusing that data, it's just sitting there. And the only time you are using it is if there's a disaster or something goes wrong, you know. Whereas what we're talking about with data reuse is providing that mechanism, that software that enables you to take that backup copy and reuse it. So to be able to instantly mount that up via self-service, so the user, the developer, whoever it is, can trigger that mechanism to spin that data up and actually make use out of it. So data reuse for me is really all about being able to access copies, spin them up really, really quickly and derive value out of them.
Jens, are you satisfied with the reuse term from the Richard? Yeah, the jingle, so...
Oh, so that's good. That means
Yeah,
good,
so
does it? Yeah.
they accept reduce.
So reduce. So this is an interesting one. So I look after two products. One called Spectrum Copy Data Management. One called Spectrum Protect Plus. Copy data management was really a technology that originally was kind of built around reducing the number of copies that can proliferate around an environment. So people would be spinning up virtual machines, people would be doing shadow IT, they'd be creating copies and potentially just leaving them everywhere. So we get this kind of mass of unused copies. So originally copy data management came about to try and reduce the number of copies that somebody or people are creating in an environment.
Especially in bigger environments like databases, the hundreds of the gigabytes or even petabytes.
That's exactly
Each
right.
copy gives you need to store it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And we still see today organizations where they'll have a production database that could be, half a terabyte or multiple terabytes in size, but they're creating we've seen some customers up to 15, 16, 17 full copies of that database that's being stored and used. So, in terms of a reduction in storage, if we can do that as a snapshot-based entity rather than a full copy, we are starting to reduce that. We're also, with the technologies we're talking about, we're cataloging everything that we're creating copies of. So that sprawl of copies is visible. So we can cut down on the sprawl of those full fat copies that are sitting out there in an environment and kind of keep everything much more under control. So we're kind of reducing the storage copies, but also the kind of management and the overhead that's associated with that as well.
Okay, so definitely the snapshot management will help us to
Absolutely.
achieve these goals.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The band? You accept?
It's good.
That is good.
Tick.
The recycle.
Recycle.
I think this is the toughest one.
This is a tough one. I'm kind of thinking, right, how do we do recycle? So you caught me by surprise with this slide. So recycling, really, again, I think that kind of comes back a little bit to the reuse.
No, you cannot.
Yeah, we can. So if you think that there was a guy who I speak to quite regularly, who's a backup guy, and he says, I'm the bin man.
I'm the bin man.
I'm the bin man. I
this
take
is a
everyone's
really good
rubbish and I put it in and I put it away and hope that we never need to get back
My
to
laptop, for example, it calls death null. So my data always go to the death null.
there you
So
go.
everybody's funny.
Yeah.
Every of my POCs implementation was the death null as a backup server.
There you go. There you go. So recycle really is about, for me, and again, it's a bit of an analogy, but data that you would have put in that bin, you can actually make use of it. So,
But it's quite risky, to put the data into the bin.
Yeah, maybe it's not really the bin, but you think of plastic bottles. Plastic bottles, you don't want to just put them away and leave them there. You want to recycle them. You want to make value out of them. And this is what we're really talking about with recycling. It's taking data that's sat in that repository and doing something with it, using it again and getting some value out of it. So that would be my analogy with recycle that you've put up there.
I see the message in the battle right now. Let's concentrate on the business side. How this modernized data protection and this reuse impact today's business and departments?
So I'd like to kind of think that in terms of the two areas that we've discussed. So if you think of the IT team and you think of everyone else, let's call them developers for now, but that kind of, the people who
The others.
Yeah, the folks who need it. So from an infrastructure and IT perspective, a lot of those traditional methodologies are quite manual. They're tasks that can take a lot of time. They're not the most interesting types of tasks. So by automating and orchestrating this process, we're freeing up their time, and we can allow those people to kind of elevate themselves to become more, I guess, like infrastructure developers rather than, IT guys who are having to do those menial tasks. Again, that has a benefit on the business because IT are freed up to do more of those important projects. So that automation and orchestration piece is really critical from the IT piece. If you look on the other side of the fence, so those folks that were shadow IT people that now are getting the benefit of this kind of data reuse, they're really all about just being able to speed up access. They can self-serve their own data. So the way these technologies work is through SLA policies. We can set policies up that mean that we can be very granular to a particular user and allow them to basically have their view of their bit of the world. So if they want to ad hoc spin up a copy of a database, they can literally press a button, mount that copy, and have that presented out and start to use it instantly. Because we're only mapping data. We're not doing a full streaming recovery like we would be doing with traditional backup. So there's a real value in terms of the development side of the world that they can go about doing their business much quicker through self-service. What that also means is the guys at the other end, the IT guys, aren't having to create tickets, and have people queue up and wait for that data. An analogy that someone gave me recently, and again, it's a very overused maybe analogy, but it's like a cash machine. You know, traditionally in the old days, and I'm old enough to remember this, you'd have to go into a bank, stand in a queue, and wait for somebody to give you the money. Whereas now you self-serve. You go and put your card in and you press a button and the money comes out. You know, and it's that type of analogy.
But it's a really good analogy, you know, through the old administrator who is taking the all responsibility for the backup tasks.
Yeah.
And, you know, they perceived as, you know, the backup is boring. But if they're right now starting the conversation with the different divisions and they're giving this value, this reuse, this reduce and the recycle, even the, you know, the data analytics, information to the business, they're starting to, you know, playing this. This is actually a new role in the organization.
It is. Your backup admin suddenly becomes almost like an internal service provider, as opposed to potentially a bit of a blocker. You know, they can offer a service out to the users in the organization, which, you know, you just couldn't do with traditional methodologies. It just doesn't happen.
So actually it's a brilliant chance for the existing backup and storage administrators.
Yeah.
So the new, you know, the new way how to protect your data, giving them additional bullets to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even with their department or outside the department.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we've got to be clear as well that, you know, this modern data protection technology is still data protection technology. You know, it still looks after compliance, regulation. It still backs data up. If something goes wrong, we can instantly recover it. But you get all of that added value of data reuse. So if we come back to the insurance policy analogy, where you're paying money for an insurance policy, you're paying money still for this data protection and data reuse, but you're getting all that data reuse piece as well.
And I think we cannot forget that this traditional way is still rock solid architecture. So
Absolutely.
in case of your machine will be destroyed, you need to have a chance to come to the bank and speak with the person.
Exactly.
So the same is this is analogy to the data protection world.
Yep.
You need to some rock solid technology that's working with tapes. You know, have some option to easily scale, but also the new approach with the SLA way how to bring this this data. Yes,
I think you can think of it as almost a tiering and thinking about what is the need of that data. And, you know, not all data needs to be kept forever. You know, you don't need to back everything up every day and put it there and keep it forever. So think of it maybe as a tiering. And if at the front end you've got technology like copy data management, so Spectrum copy data management, which is hardware snapshotting for instant recovery of large databases and things like that, really aimed at that kind of DevOps and development type environment. Then you've got Spectrum Protect Plus, which is backup, but with the same utilization and same use case of instantly mounting data for all of those types of reuse. Then you've got Protect, Spectrum Protect, which is a, you know, traditional backup methodology, but still needed.
Yeah, the legacy.
Yeah, but for either legacy front-end applications, but also for longer-term retention. If you want to keep something, and a lot of customers do, for 5 years, 7 years, lifetime, then tape generally is a good place to put that type of technology. Okay. But then also, you know, we then think about, well, what are the other areas that we could be, other repositories? We've got cloud, we've got object storage, lots of other ways of storing data and putting it in the appropriate place.
Okay. Richard, last question. So, because how you see and how you're comparing the reuse term, because we really concentrate on of this methodology with this secondary data management. Yes, is it far away, or because most of the market is using more terms secondary data management, not reuse? So how you see it, how you cope with it?
That's a good point. So in my mind, I think data reuse is a component part of secondary data management. I think taking a kind of elevated view of secondary data management, and you know, we talked about how infrastructures are modernizing very, very rapidly. So what we want to be able to do is be able to be agile and look at whatever those new databases and applications may be, and have a software layer in the middle that's able to very easily ingest that data, to catalog that data, to back it up in the most appropriate way, and to put that onto the most appropriate media that's required. So that would be, in my idea, what secondary data management is about. It's finding the appropriate way of managing whatever's thrown at us and putting it on the right media. Data reuse, I think, is a critical component part of a modern secondary data management infrastructure. Otherwise, we're just doing traditional backup again, you know?
Okay. Thank you, Richard. It was a pleasure, and we got lots of good information about how to get the proper approach into the modernized data protection, especially using the reuse philosophy, reduce and recycle. Okay, so thank you, team, for this, and Richard for this brilliant analogy. So we have a shops, we have a cash machines, and we spoke a lot about the data reuse and secondary data management trend.
Yep.
So I think I'm satisfied about this episode, but let's wait for all of the audience to get some comments, and if they have something more, we'll come back to this topic, definitely.
Excellent. Yeah.
So that was the Friday Dose, the Backup Monster show. My special guest was Richard Wallace from IBM. Thank you. Ben.
Cheers, Paweł. Thank you.
I'm waiting for the Backup Monster band and their analogy to this slide.
It's really complicated when I'm already talking.
Yeah, you prepared. You're so prepared right now. We'll cut it out. Nie słyszałeś?
Nie. Rozmawiałem z kolegą z zespołu.
Beautiful